thanks for joining us here in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm Molly O'Brien. I'd like you to meet Andrea Limbago. She works in national security in Washington, D.C., and I'm going to give you her whole background here. She's the chief social scientist at Endgame. She holds a PhD in political science, and her writing has been featured in Politico, Business Insider, The Hill, among other publications as well. So we're happy to have her here on Go Local Live, the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's awesome to have you here. And you made a quick trip from D.C. up today. You just came from the airport. So thank you for making a pit stop here at Go Local Live. So let's talk a little bit about why you're here in Rhode Island. You're speaking on a panel today at Salve Regina, the Warrior Women panel, Science and Tech Edition, and it's called Empowering Young Women in National Security. And our friend Jennifer McArdle is behind the scenes. She is doing the moderating tonight. So we're kind of, let's start off by this. What do you hope to see tonight when you're speaking?
That's interesting. Honestly, I hope to see a lot of women and men actually in the crowd. So within cybersecurity itself, there are only roughly 10% women in the workforce. So that clearly needs to change, and so it's going to take a combination of men and women to change that. So for me, cybersecurity writ large actually has a huge workforce shortage. So if I can just help spark a little bit of interest for anyone in the audience to want to pursue the cybersecurity career path, that would be awesome. It makes headlines almost daily.
Yeah.
Made it already again just a little while ago. So the more hands on deck to help with this challenge, the better. So that's my hope.
So as you talk tonight, another woman joining the panel tonight in the discussions, you're going to be talking about kind of some trends in cybersecurity and kind of giving some insight to people that are there. You're going to have some talk back, some question and answers. But I'm kind of curious. You just mentioned hoping to kind of get more women involved in this field. Are panel discussions like this, are going out and speaking to young women and young men as well, is this what we need to do to get more women involved in science and tech, in cybersecurity? Do people need, we talk about this all the time in coding, you know?
Exactly.
Do we need to get more women like yourself out there involved in discussion to get more women involved in jobs?
Yeah, I mean I think so. I think that there's going to take so many different levels of approaches that need to be done. I think that's one of them. For the most part, there's the Girls Who Code has the saying that if they don't see it, they won't be it. And so I think the same thing absolutely in cybersecurity. And so and it goes both on people who are pulling together conferences need to get women, encourage women to be speakers. And then women also tend to be less inclined unless they know 100% of every detail about something. They may not feel comfortable being on a panel. And so we kind of have to get over that. I mean, I've sort of been pushing myself out and trying to get past that discomfort. But I think it's really, really important. I think actually the example I like to use, I wrote a little piece on after this last U.S. Open when you had the 4 women that were all from the U.S. in the finals, sort of the Serena Williams factor, right? So they were able to grow up, along with Venus. We were able to see Serena Williams and Venus, break the boundaries. And so you see the next generation. I mean, you see that clearly, that what happens when they have role models. And I think in cybersecurity, we have a lot of really great women. We need to get them out there more and help augment their voice more so than what we've been seeing so far. And another actually the issue, so often these women in tech and cybersecurity areas, the women they bring out, it's normally a women in diversity panel. And so when the young women coming in, they see and they hear about the challenges of it and how hard it is. And and it's important to point out those things, but you also need to highlight the cool stuff that you can do and the interesting work that can be done. And so that's why I love that the way that the Warrior Women is pulled together. It's highlighting the actual interesting work that we're doing versus again focusing on how hard it is and the negative data and so forth.
All that stuff as well. And you mentioned that, and you wrote about it in a blog post as well, that it's not just being a woman working in the field of cybersecurity, national security, and being on a panel as a woman talking about it, but you said to overcome these challenges, you also have to, what were the words you used? You said we all need to elevate women's expertise, meaning instead of just having a woman speak on the panels about being a woman in the field, you have to have the women discuss all about their expertise and show off their expertise in the field.
Yeah. No, and absolutely, and that's again, if they're not talking about the expertise and the cool things they're doing, then the men aren't going to see that, and they're going to assume that the woman in the room is the one taking the notes or something along those lines. So I think it has a broad impact both for women coming up, but also I think it helps educate the men as far as what expectations can be for the women. And so there are really phenomenal women in cybersecurity, and there are a lot of them that do serve as role models. There are a lot more that we can see out there, and it really is they elevating and augmenting their voices and their expertise, and sort of helping make that be better known. I think that it'll go a long way, hopefully for the next generation.
Definitely. Well, let's talk about your expertise and not just have you talk about being a woman. And so you're right. I mean, that's what you said. We can elevate. So let's use your expertise here while we have you here. And we're so thankful that you were able to make a pit stop. So let's get into this. You mentioned that there's a huge workforce in cybersecurity field. In the field, talk to me about that. What does that mean, and does that put our nation's security at risk?
So that's a great question. So especially when you start thinking about the national security area as far as the private sector, and then you have the public sector as well. And so the government has done a decent job in some more of the traditional areas as far as the intel community and the Department of Defense. But as we've seen with like the OPM hack and some of the other hacks, the civilian aspect of the government isn't quite up to par in that level. So the U.S. still has, I think, the most creative and innovative cybersecurity experts in the world, and so that's great.
Good to know.
But we need more of them, and we need broader spread of their expertise in the private sector as well. And that's, again, when we keep seeing these hacks occur, a lot of times it's companies either are under-resourced, so they can't either buy the tools they need, or they can't have enough employees to do those areas. So I do think it does have an impact. And it's not just national security, it's also economic security as well, especially for some of these companies that it becomes an existential threat if they end up getting hacked. And you see that with Equifax occurring, all of our personal data is out there, so it even becomes something that impacts all of us in our day-to-day lives and how we're living. So I do think it should be a top concern, and that's why, again, the more people we can encourage from a variety of disciplines, and that's the other aspect, actually, that, so cybersecurity, everyone thinks of hackers and guys in hoodies and so forth, and clearly it's a lot more than that. A lot of the initial modes of compromise are through social engineering, and so people who understand social media and those kind of aspects, that's important. The legal aspect, there's an ethical and privacy aspect. So it's going to take a broad range of expertise in addition to the computer science expertise.
Okay, so multiple people from multiple backgrounds. You're saying not just what you might initially think when you say cybersecurity, multiple backgrounds to help get better.
I do, yeah, absolutely. And that's it's a multidisciplinary approach, and depending, there are different aspects of the challenge with it. So absolutely for stronger defenses, people need to understand the coding and the computer security aspect of it. But they need to make that more usable, and so that's where you interface design, and some designers can get into the field and help make these tools more intuitive for a broader range of people to use. People like social scientists and international relations who understand what adversaries may go after and why certain companies or people may be a target. All that's important. Then you get the behavioral aspects, and so that's where you get some of the psychology of it and then the economics of it. And so it can cross a broad spectrum, and I think that part of the cybersecurity almost has a branding issue where everyone just thinks it's the kid in the hoodie, and it's really, it's not. I mean, there are those, but that's not even close to what the entire industry is. And I think we're just going to need more and more people from these diverse backgrounds. And data science, I think, is another major area, given the amount of data that needs to be explored and analyzed and so forth.
It seems from what you're saying, it would be, why not go into this field? It sounds like there are a lot of jobs. Why not dig into this field?
No, and that's a great point.
Easy job potential. It's there. We have the jobs.
It is. I mean, the job openings are there for the foreseeable future. Yeah. It's a pretty solid income coming in, especially even just out of undergrad. So there are minimal drawbacks, assuming that you show some interest in this area. The problem is almost on the industry side as well, though. Hasn't adjusted some of the way that some job requirements are written and understanding what skill sets they need. And so it's similar to where data science was probably about a decade ago, where people thought they know they need a data scientist, but they don't know what to do with them. They're kind of like, well, we know we need some cybersecurity person, but we're not really sure why or how to integrate them in addition to sort of the more core area, or they don't have the resources. I mean, it still becomes another aspect of it, but for people looking for jobs, there are plenty of openings out there. There are a lot of training opportunities that are out there as well. And I think a lot of the universities are starting to they're starting to figure out some sort of these multidisciplinary ways to go through their education. Do a double major with computer science with something like legal, and those kind of integration of skill sets, I think is going to be really interesting. But yeah, there are plenty of openings. They're really, I highly recommend that being somewhere to go. We need it for both economic and national security, and for the social and privacy aspect as well. There's so many different areas of cybersecurity that are available.
So get to it, everybody. Yeah. If you're going to school, change your major. It's time. I want to talk to you a little bit about, because we talked a little bit about, we've kind of hit on all these little areas, but as we're talking about, and we'll kind of get back into the job aspect, but you wrote a piece for Business Insider saying that destructive cyber attacks are only going to get worse. That's a little frightening to hear coming from an expert on cybersecurity, but tell me a little bit about what you mean by that.
Sure. And so the interesting thing, so just like in any kind of tool of statecraft, which cybersecurity becomes for nation states, as geopolitical tensions, so as tensions rise between the different groups from one country to another country, they're going to start looking at what means they have to impact the other country or their adversaries. And so, there's been the traditional military means, which have been more kinetic, but you have to get to a certain point to cross into that, and that obviously has profound implications. But so short of that, different ways have been either through some sort of information area or economics, but now with the cyber domain, emerging over the last 20, 30 years, that's become the tool of choice because attribution is difficult. It's low resources. There's an asymmetric nature of it, which means that you can do a lot with few resources in this regard. So that's what the countries are. It's mainly the nation states right now. Other actors are starting to get involved, which would be a different discussion. But for now, we'll keep it simple.
You go down a rabbit hole.
Yeah, exactly. Let's stick with nation states for now. But because tensions are just rising between, you have North and South Korea that have been going on with the tit for tat in this area, Russia versus Ukraine, Saudi Arabia and Iran, and so as the tensions are continue to rise over really the last decade between some of these countries, they're starting to realize that they can escalate a bit more, and they move from just more traditional reconnaissance, trying to figure out information and data collection, for more trying to understand the different groups and actors, and now they're starting to ratchet up their objectives towards putting malicious software in place for more sabotage intent. And there have been some cases. So the Kiev power grid last year was one of the first, not the first, but one of them for an energy grid to be taken down. But they were able to get it back up fairly quickly. But those are the kind of concerns that we keep seeing. And just over the last month or two alone, we've seen 2 different instances of different nation-state advanced persistent threats having implanted some software within our energy grids. And so the key is to find those on time and be proactive in looking for these. But that's why if all of a sudden the tensions between the countries were to all of a sudden just ebb, we probably would see a ratcheting down. So there's the human element of all this. And so, okay. And then also the one other aspect on top of it is there's been a proliferation of open source capabilities with the shadow brokers in Ball 7, which have been linked to nation state hacks of U.S. capabilities. So all that now is out there in the wild, wow. And so and they're now much more accessible.
It seems when you get into it, when you look at it, for a person, just a regular person who's walking down the street, pulls up the news on their cell phone, whatever news they can get into, when you look at it, everything that you just mentioned, it seems pretty terrifying. It seems pretty scary. If you just peel back one piece of information and then you start looking at the layers and layers and layers, I mean, how does you look at the Equifax breach, you look at the Yahoo breach, and then you look at just everything that you just said, and now you're telling me that it's only going to get worse. What can a regular person do to protect themselves from breaches on the personal side of things? What can small businesses do to protect themselves, just on a day-to-day level?
Yeah, that's good. And so that's actually wrote a piece that basically don't give up hope on this. So
okay. Don't be terrified out of your mind, people.
We should be concerned. That's what we should be smartly concerned.
Okay.
And prepared. But and there are defenses that we can take against this. And so on the personal side, just one area I think that people just so often forget is that the social aspect is how a lot of your data gets taken for individuals. And so either through social media, there could be a fake LinkedIn profile created that then that reaches out to you, you accept, and then you download an Excel spreadsheet or a Word doc that's got malicious software in it. So make sure who you're connecting with on cross social media are people you know and trust. And you can even if it turns out like they know mutual people, do another layer just to make sure.
Okay.
And then within emails, so Yahoo just got breached. they're not going to send you an email saying click here to change your password. Go straight to Yahoo, go into your account and do it that way. Where a lot of the phishing that goes in, which is basically social means to try and get people to click on things, which then gets access to your computer. So through that, don't click on those. Like Bank of America is not going to send you a link saying click here to update your data. So always go straight to the source on that. So just some basic tips like that can really help a lot for people. And then even take that kind of activity though, and take it into your workforce too, because a lot of times businesses are targeted through employees, not necessarily always executives. It could be at various levels of it. And so be smart with your passwords. Use two-factor authentication, which I know a lot of people kind of hear about that but don't really know what it is, and that's basically an additional step of verification that it's you. So Gmail does it, a lot of the emails use it, Twitter, Facebook, all of those have the two-factor authentication along with it. So take advantage of that, because that'll prevent someone from remotely accessing your account if you have that installed. At least adds another layer of security in that regard.
Well, and it seems like we have to do more and more every day to protect ourselves, and it seems like with if you can't trust a company like Equifax, who's supposed to be protecting us, right?
Right.
Who are we supposed to trust?
Right. So honestly, that's where Congress is going to have to step in and start providing some regulations for companies that have that amount of data.
Okay.
I think we're going to start seeing a very different relationship between private and public sectors. For a long time, we've had the private-public partnerships that have been kind of based on encryption and some other debates that honestly we should be moving on and start thinking about how better ways to regulate in some areas for companies that have that degree of data. I know no one necessarily likes to hear that, but that's a way to help maintain some of that security. But then when you think about everything that's going on with like Facebook and Twitter and Google as far as algorithms and the biases that can be inherent in algorithms and the way they can be manipulated. So again, there needs some more greater transparency, more human on the loop on the private sector side, and then on the government side, having better understanding of the different interactions going on there and who has access to the data.
Okay. Rhode Island State Police have formed a joint cyber task force. It's a public-private partnership to help protect and respond to incidents here in Rhode Island. Have you seen this become a trend? Do you think it's a good idea? Do you think is this going to be a continuation? Do we need this kind of protection?
Probably. I think it's a good thing. It's a good sign. I think it's nice to have a formalized way to have people who do have the expertise in this area be able to come together almost like a National Guard in times of incidents. But in this case, it's an electronic attack occurs, and have people be able to quickly come together and help address the problem. I think it's a great idea, because especially there's so much expertise outside the government in this area that wants to help. And so I think doing something like that is a really great way to create a task force, to get them working together. Estonia actually has a good model for that, for these kind of things. And so in the U.S., I have heard of more and more of those starting to pop up, and I think that's a really good idea. It'll especially help corporations know where to reach out to respond to an attack versus thinking they should respond on their own, which is also happening. So I think it also helps hedge against that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think because if you do get hacked personally, or your business, or there's so many. That kind of the interesting thing, scary thing. There's so many different elements of cybersecurity, right? So if you have a place to go, if you have a problem or an incident, knowing where to go to respond to. Before you go, because our time is running down, and I know you guys do have to run. You mentioned Google, you mentioned Twitter, you mentioned Yahoo. Just talking about, and you did write on your blog, in a blog post, I should say. This is a quote from your blog. For today's attackers, information security is synonymous with information control, including theft, manipulation, destruction, and disinformation, end quote. That's pretty powerful. You mentioned just the analytics of Google. I read an interesting article the other day that had to do with the Las Vegas shooting. There was so much information. I mean, it made me sick to my stomach. The things that were trending on Google were totally untrue, and it's information that's just untrue. But because of analytics, misinformation popped it up, and it lasted. It lasted on Google. It lasted on Facebook. So that and you wrote that article, that blog post. I think it was earlier in September, right?
Yeah, it was before that.
So it was before this, but that's just another example.
It's another example, and we keep seeing this over and over. We saw it with the protest during the national anthem. I mean, every event that we start in the U.S. that's across the board, either social or different criminal acts, those kind of things, we start seeing these different kinds of news trending and the disinformation trending. And it's a powerful tool, disinformation. Propaganda has been around for a while, but thanks to the algorithms, thanks to the automation, the bots, it's changing the landscape, and so we absolutely need to start thinking stronger and seriously about how to address that, because there are technical solutions out there, and a lot of them may or may not be, there's not going to be a perfect answer. We need to start moving towards, progressing towards trying to find something that at least can help prevent something like that. I do think we need more humans in the loop along with those lines to help guide what pops up and when, and as opposed to just saying, well, the algorithms were deciding who's what categories they can buy ads in. I mean, we need to move beyond that.
Okay, it's been so great chatting with you today. I guess one last question I want to ask you is really on a positive note, because there's so much to talk about. What are you looking forward to speaking about today? You're going out and you're going to be speaking to a lot of young people, a lot of people already probably involved in the industry as well. What are you looking forward to talking about tonight?
Also, just probably meeting other people who are interested in this area and what questions they have, and I just like being in the national security community. Just it's a nice community to be in. I spend a lot of my time more in the tech community now, so it'll be nice going back to more of my roots and just talking about the national security implications of everything.
Good. Well, we're so glad to have you here today on Go Local Live and to have you here in Rhode Island. Hopefully you can enjoy your trip, but albeit brief. So Andrea Limbago, thank you so much for joining us today, and look forward to all your insight as